What's up, folks? It's Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my reaction to the first episode of Defenders. Defenders just dropped last night at midnight. I finally got a chance to watch the first episode. I've been waiting a long time for this series. I remember it was about 4 or 5 years ago now. Like, there was that announcement. Netflix and Disney and Marvel have made a deal. They're going to produce 4 different series: Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and then it's going to converge onto the Defenders, just like when they introduced Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and of course Hulk, and then it all converged into the Avengers. That happened right after the Avengers had been released, so it was an exciting announcement for sure, and it was again one of those things where it's like, cool, can't wait to see if this works out, but it's going to be a while before it all kind of culminates to the pinnacle of what was promised, which is, again, this team up of these characters after they've been introduced, right? So we got Daredevil, excellent. We got Jessica Jones, fantastic. We got Daredevil season 2, phenomenal. We got Luke Cage, pretty damn fucking good. And then, of course, we got Iron Fist, which was all right, you know? For me personally, like, I didn't have too much of a problem with it, but based on what I hear from the reactions online, a lot of people had a lot of problems with that series. Obviously, for me, it wasn't the best, but like it did feel like it was in the world, and it did feel like it continued it. And you know, Claire was in it, Mrs. Gao was in it. Like there was a lot of good stuff in there. I like the guy that played Iron Fist. Maybe he didn't get quite a chance to kind of grow and become the Iron Fist that people want to see, but you know, the kid was in Game of Thrones. You know, he did a good job there. Now he's here, and as far as I'm concerned, like it was fine. You know, it was fine. Like the story was cool. There were a couple of cool twists. Yeah, I could have used a little more Kunlun or whatever, but I feel like a lot of it was. Like, I feel like that show was kind of like what the first Captain America was, and like Thor, where like they were cool, but they were kind of underwhelming because they felt more of like, sort of like a prequel type of material for the Avengers. So now here we have the Defenders. The show starts right where the Iron Fist show ended. So it basically is continuing the Danny Rand story. We have Colleen Wing. So we have all the familiar faces that we want to see from their world. But what's great about this Defenders show is that now we're seeing all of the characters in one show. And the way the show is handling it is basically, it's just like continuing on all 4 series. So much like the Avengers was I think what was so kind of groundbreaking about the Avengers was that it was itself a sequel to 4 different films. It was a sequel to the Iron Man films, which we would say Iron Man 2 at that point, because that's the only 2 that come out. So it was a sequel to Iron Man 2, it was a sequel to The Incredible Hulk, it was a sequel to Captain America the First Avenger, and it was a sequel to Thor. So it not only was it a great sort of event, but it was also a successful film in terms of like doing something that no other film had done before, which is to be a sequel to this many movies and be successful and be able to balance all the characters. So this show is sort of that now. Like this is like the Netflix universe version of the Avengers, and it's as far as the first episode goes, it's being successful and kind of carrying through like this sort of promise of like a convergence of these 4 stories into one story that you know feels organic. It doesn't feel forced. It feels like the next chapter in all 4 of these characters' lives, and so therefore being a sequel to those 4 series. So this sort of the follow-up season to all 4 of those series. Well, obviously for Daredevil this would be the 3rd one, but Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, this is like the season 2 of all of those. Anyway, so like it's giving me a very successful sort of sequel to the series vibe, which I'm loving. I love these 4 characters. I love Luke Cage. I love Jessica Jones. We haven't seen enough of them. Of course, Daredevil is freaking fantastic. Like the portrayal of him, the world around him, all of it is fantastic. Karen Page, Froggy, acted exceptionally well. Of course, Misty Knight and Claire are in this, and they're freaking great. So those are like the Luke Cage backups, and then of course Jessica Jones. She's got The chick, I forgot her name, that becomes Hellcat. I'm sorry, folks, if I screwed those up. Anyway, she's got her supporting characters in there. We see a lot of the familiar faces, and we see a lot of the intertwining. We see that Froggy is the one that defended Luke Cage and got him out of prison. We know that Jessica Jones's friend Trinity from the Matrix films, who Froggy now works with in the law firm, like she's responsible for getting Danny Rand set up in his own series when he was reemerging and taking back his corporate empire. Anyway, there's a lot of crossover, but obviously at the heart of it all is Claire. I'm thinking Claire's the one that's going to bring everybody together, but as we saw at the end of this episode, it was this earthquake that, like, I was thinking as the episode was going along, like, what is going to really bring these four together? And we see that we have this super villain, apparently, just relative to the street level criminal world that these four heroes operate in. She is the super villain. And of course, who better to play her than, of course, Sigourney Weaver, legendary. Her presence is undeniable. It immediately commands respect, and you buy the character right away. She's a villain, fine. I buy it as a villain. She's a threat, yeah, I feel it. She's Mrs. Gao's boss. Mrs. Gao is a tough lady, and she always kind of brought sort of that gravitas of being like a head, kind of orchestrator of a lot of this stuff. But it's like, of course, there's got to be somebody above her, and Sigourney Weaver is the person, at least in this show. And so we're getting that. We're getting a very successful introduction of a villain. I do hope that we see some Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. I hope we see some Kingpin in this. That would be really great, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But you never know. I hear there might be some Punisher in this. Anyway, I'm going to try to do a video for each episode as I go along. One thing I did have kind of it's not necessarily with this episode that I have a problem with, but just overall with the series, like, I don't particularly understand when everything took place. Like, it feels like, based on what we're seeing here, that Jessica Jones just kind of happened a bit ago. But we know Luke Cage maybe happened right after Jessica Jones, or did it happen when he was like away during that period where he wasn't in the show and then got brought back? No, that didn't happen then, because he went to prison after that. So that's not where it happened. I remember there was this gap in Jessica Jones when he left and came back and was under the control of the Purple Man. Anyway, obviously that happened after this, but then he's been in prison and Froggy's been getting him out. He finally got him out. But the way Jessica Jones was talking was that it seemed as though like her stuff just happened as well. So like the time is a little weird to me, and I wish they would have addressed that in Luke Cage. Because they didn't talk about Jessica Jones at all in Luke Cage, and they should have, because he did play a role in that world, and at the end of that series it kind of seemed like him and her were going to continue being together, whatever. But after that, obviously they weren't together in his show, and now he's with Claire, and I love it, but it's like, when did that happen? Anyway, that's my only sort of problem with the series, but it's not really a problem because I really like the series and I really enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to more. Overall, everything about this episode was great. The direction was fantastic. Like, all the shot, there was a lot, like, basically every scene was shot in a really interesting way. A lot of interesting angles, a lot of interesting kind of framing where you only see like the characters and like kind of like a part of the frame, kind of giving it a more gritty, kind of detached, but also kind of creepy, intimate effect. It's really masterfully done. Like, definitely we didn't get too much of that sort of artistic approach to representing the story in Iron Fist, which I think is partly what hurt it. But in this one, we're seeing a lot of like that sort of artistic approach to actual representation of the sequences. Like, there was this one just very brief sort of transition where like Luke Cage was leaving somewhere and he puts his hood up, and immediately you cut to Jessica Jones. You have this graphic matching cut where it's her basically in the same position and she's taking her hood off. So subtle, but like so smooth and wonderful. And little touches like that are just a clear sign of like whoever is putting this together like cares about not just telling a story, not just about earning a paycheck, but like really like being successful in his portrayal of this world and in the way the story is told visually via the filmic language. So there's a lot of really great aspects to everything. So far, I've been, again, waiting for this show for so long, and I can't wait to see what happens. Like, we saw Elektra. There's going to be a lot of hand stuff in this. I remember there was a big sort of, it was like a big crater, a big sort of hole in the earth in New York that was revealed in Daredevil. They never talked again about that in any of the other series. That was related to the hand. So, you know, maybe that's going to play a role. So we'll see. Maybe this earthquake thing happened as a result of something they put in the earth deep under New York City. Who knows what they're actually trying to achieve? Sigourney Weaver has got some plans, and apparently they're being sped up because she's dying, and you know, she has to take care of a lot of evil before she goes on to the great beyond, I guess, is what the situation is in her head. Like, I'm dying, so I better be super evil before I die. Like, who knows what goes on inside villains' heads, but I'm assuming that it has some connection to her, like, trying to beat death, because obviously we've seen Elektra come back to life, and we've seen the hand's ability to bring people back to life. So I'm sure that's going to play a role as well. Anyway, that's the end of my episode 1 of season 1, The Defenders, kind of thoughts, reaction, and I'm going to move on to episode 2, and I'll be back in a bit to give my thoughts on that. As always, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, put an X in the box because ain't nobody checking me. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so right there so you don't miss anything both related to this show and other stuff that I'll be posting in the years to come. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.